Philadelphia, 1986. The streets are tense, the air thick with whispers of fear and ambition. A city once ruled in silence by Nicodemo, Little Nicky, Scarfo, now trembles in the vacuum he left behind. Scarfo's empire, built on murder, intimidation, and control of unions, has been toppled by federal indictments. But the fall of one boss does not bring peace. It sparks a war. Inside dimly lit bars, in back rooms of pizzerias, and along the narrow streets of South Philly, rival factions move like predators circling prey. On one side, the old guard, loyal to the traditions of the Mafia, seeks stability. John Stanfa, hand-picked by the powerful New York families, steps in to restore order. Calm, calculating, and bound by the codes of the past, he aims to reassert control over the city's criminal operations. On the other side, a new generation rises. Young, bold, and unafraid of the spotlight, Joey Merlino and his allies challenge the old rules. They crave power, status, and influence, and they are willing to fight for it openly. Their ambition is reckless, their methods brazen. Violence flares, vendettas erupt, and the city watches as the Mafia, once hidden in shadows, becomes a spectacle. Every alley, every neighborhood corner seems to hold a secret. Phone lines are tapped, informants whisper in fear, and law enforcement struggles to keep up. The streets of Philadelphia are no longer merely controlled. They are a battlefield. This is a story of power, betrayal, and survival. Of a Mafia family at war with itself, and of a city caught in the crossfire. The fall of Scarfo didn't just change the balance of power. It changed Philadelphia forever. Chapter 1. The Fall of Scarfo. Philadelphia, early 1980s. The name Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo carries weight on every block, every corner, and every alley. Scarfo is small in stature, but enormous in reputation. A man feared for his ruthless efficiency, he rules the Philadelphia crime family with an iron fist, and a trail of blood follows wherever his orders go. Scarfo's reign begins in the shadow of Angelo Bruno, the gentle Don, whose murder in 1980 triggers a violent power struggle. Scarfo seizes control, and his leadership is defined by a relentless streak of violence. Unlike Bruno, who preferred negotiation and subtle manipulation, Scarfo relies on fear to maintain loyalty. His enforcers are brutal, his punishments swift, and his paranoia constant. Under Scarfo, the Philadelphia family controls unions, illegal gambling, loan sharking, and the nascent drug trade. Politicians and city officials are quietly influenced, businesses pay protection money, and neighborhoods feel the pressure of his rule. To outsiders, his network seems impenetrable, almost invisible. But inside, his men live in constant tension, unsure who will be the next target of his wrath. Violence is both tool and spectacle. Men vanish in the dead of night. Bodies are found in abandoned lots, alleys, or even in the Delaware River. One former associate remembers, "Little Nicky didn't care who you were. Blood was cheap if you crossed him. I saw men disappear for less than a look." Scarfo's paranoia fuels his tyranny. He suspects rivals at every turn. Loyalty is bought through fear. Informants are eliminated. Betrayals are met with instant, often gruesome consequences. His ruthlessness earns him loyalty, yes, but also resentment and terror. Meanwhile, the FBI has been quietly building a case. Wiretaps, surveillance, and undercover operations slowly reveal the true extent of Scarfo's empire. They document his involvement in murder, extortion, loan sharking, illegal gambling, and his manipulation of unions. Evidence grows steadily, a silent counterweight to Scarfo's overt brutality. By 1986, the net tightens. Federal prosecutors indict Scarfo on multiple charges, ranging from racketeering to conspiracy to commit murder. Former associates and low-level mobsters testify against him, hoping for leniency. Scarfo's carefully constructed empire is now exposed, thread by thread. Scarfo's arrest sends shockwaves through Philadelphia. His enforcers, once disciplined by fear, scramble to find direction. Some align with the old guard, men who value stability and tradition. Others see opportunity in rebellion, ready to challenge authority. The delicate hierarchy he maintained crumbles, replaced by chaos. Inside Scarfo's former territories, new figures begin to emerge. John Stanfa, an older, disciplined mobster with ties to the New York families, begins positioning himself as a stabilizer. His goal is to restore order, consolidate operations, and reassert the authority of traditional mafia structure. Meanwhile, Joey Merlino and his younger cohort test limits, challenging tradition, flaunting authority, and daring to seize power. Violence escalates as factions clash. Shootings, beatings, and intimidation tactics surge across South Philadelphia. Streets that once bowed to Scarfo now host battles for supremacy. Each faction seeks to assert dominance, to claim the city for themselves, while the FBI watches and waits, gathering evidence, monitoring movements, and preparing for the prosecutions that will ultimately decide the family's fate. The arrest also changes the psyche of Philadelphia itself. Citizens who once feared venturing out at night now see gunfire and bloodshed spill into their neighborhoods. Business owners who once quietly paid tribute to Scarfo now face new threats from competing factions. Even within the law enforcement community, there is caution. The mob may be vulnerable, but it is far from defeated. Scarfo himself, now behind bars, watches as the empire he built begins to fracture. His legacy of violence has left a city teetering on the edge of war. Paranoia continues to ripple outward. Some of Scarfo's old lieutenants cling to his memory, attempting to assert control. Others reject the old ways entirely, embracing the daring, brazen tactics that will define the next generation of Philadelphia mobsters. The fall of Scarfo is more than a criminal conviction. It is the spark for a generational battle. It is the moment when a city that once lived in quiet terror witnesses the unraveling of one of the most feared crime families in the United States. It is a story of power vacuums, ambition, loyalty, and betrayal, of men willing to kill for dominance and survive against impossible odds. Philadelphia's streets are now a stage, and the players are shifting. Old loyalties clash with new ambition. Tradition collides with audacity. The stage is set for a civil war within the city's underworld, a battle that will pit seasoned veterans against rising stars, and secrecy against a more public, flamboyant style of criminal enterprise. Scarfo's fall marks the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another. A chapter defined by blood, betrayal, and the rise of the next generation. A chapter that will forever change the landscape of organized crime in Philadelphia. The city waits, tense and watchful, as the war for its streets quietly begins. Chapter 2. Old Guard Ascends. Philadelphia, 1986. The streets are still buzzing from the chaos left by Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo's arrest. But in the shadows, a new power struggle quietly takes shape. The city's underworld is no longer unified. It is fractured, hungry, and poised for a showdown. Amid the uncertainty, John Stanfa emerges, a man whose reputation, discipline, and New York connections promise to restore order, at least in theory. Stanfa, born into Philadelphia's Italian-American community, is a veteran of the Mafia's traditional hierarchy. He understands the importance of loyalty, secrecy, and structure. While Scarfo's reign relied on fear and relentless brutality, Stanfa's approach is calculated, patient, and methodical. He values stability above all else, believing that the Philadelphia crime family can only survive if its leadership enforces discipline and respects the unwritten codes of the Mafia. The New York families, Gambino, Genovese, and Colombo, have a vested interest in Philadelphia. Scarfo's violent unpredictability and the rising chaos threaten their regional influence. They endorse Stanfa as a stabilizing figure, someone who can consolidate operations, prevent unnecessary violence, and keep Philadelphia's criminal enterprise productive and predictable. Stanfa begins his ascent quietly. He meets with key lieutenants, negotiates alliances, and offers protection to those willing to swear loyalty. He uses diplomacy alongside intimidation, reminding the younger faction that the Mafia's code demands obedience and respect for the chain of command. But not everyone is convinced. Joey Merlino and his cohort of younger mobsters view Stanfa as an obstacle to their ambition. They are bold, aggressive, and media-savvy, willing to flaunt authority and challenge tradition. Where Stanfa represents restraint and secrecy, Merlino embodies audacity and rebellion. The tension between the old guard and the new blood is immediate. Shootings in South Philadelphia streets, threats against business owners, and targeted attacks on rival factions signal the beginning of open conflict. Stanfa tries to assert authority through strategic enforcement, leveraging loyal veterans to control key rackets. One associate recalls, "Stanfa wasn't flashy like Little Nicky. He didn't need to prove anything with a body count every week, but you knew he meant business. Cross him and you disappeared, but he preferred control over chaos." Despite his experience, Stanfa faces significant challenges. Scarfo's former lieutenants are fragmented, some unwilling to follow any authority. Neighborhood crews that once operated quietly now push for independence, emboldened by the absence of Scarfo's fear. Even within his own faction, loyalty is tentative. Some see Stanfa's leadership as temporary, waiting for an opportunity to seize power themselves. To strengthen his position, Stanfa begins strategic moves. He consolidates control over profitable rackets, gambling, loan sharking, and union manipulation, ensuring revenue flows to the family. He attends clandestine meetings with New York bosses, seeking advice and reaffirming Philadelphia's subordination to national mafia rules. Yet, Merlino and the younger mobsters resist quietly at first, avoiding direct confrontation while slowly building alliances. They target weak points in Stanfa's network, leveraging intimidation and the promise of wealth. Their ambition is evident in small acts of defiance, encroaching on territories, questioning orders, and asserting independence in minor disputes. Stanfa responds with a combination of diplomacy and threat. He communicates the consequences of rebellion clearly. In whispered conversations, he reminds the family of Scarfo's fate and the price of disobedience. "We don't need blood spilling every day to run this city," Stanfa reportedly said in a meeting with his lieutenants. "But anyone who thinks they can take what isn't theirs will learn the hard way." The contrast between Stanfa and Merlino grows starker. While Stanfa relies on strategy, discretion, and calculated intimidation, Merlino's faction thrives on boldness and spectacle. This generational divide defines the war to come. Stanfa represents the old Mafia, structured, secretive, and disciplined. Merlino represents the new era, aggressive, flashy, and unafraid of attracting attention. As months pass, the city watches the slow escalation. Shootings and beatings become more frequent. Neighborhoods once loyal to Scarfo now navigate the uncertain loyalties of competing factions. Law enforcement, observing from the sidelines, begins to see patterns of violence that signal not random chaos, but a carefully emerging conflict between Stanfa's old guard and Merlino's new blood. Stanfa's rise is significant but precarious. He is respected, feared, and backed by powerful allies, yet the younger faction's audacity threatens to destabilize everything. Each decision he makes, which crew to protect, which operation to control, which men to silence, carries consequences that could either solidify his authority or ignite full-scale war. By the end of this early phase, Stanfa has achieved something Scarfo never could: temporary consolidation of operations and a veneer of order in a city poised for chaos. But the balance is delicate. The younger faction is growing bolder, emboldened by the very restrictions Stanfa tries to enforce. And with every threat, every whispered defiance, the stage is set for a brutal civil war that will engulf Philadelphia and thrust the mob into the national spotlight. In this city, power is fleeting, authority is fragile. And for John Stanfa, the old guard, the question remains: can discipline and tradition withstand the ambition and audacity of a new generation? Philadelphia waits, tense, as the first cracks in the mob's armor begin to show, a prelude to a war that will redefine organized crime in the city forever. Chapter 3: Rise of the Young Guns. The year is 1990. The Philadelphia underworld is simmering beneath the surface. The streets whisper of new power, young ambition, and danger waiting to erupt. While John Stanfa tightens his grip with old-world discipline, a new force is rising, one that refuses to bow to tradition. His name is Joey Merlino. Merlino, in his early 30s, is the polar opposite of Stanfa. Charismatic, reckless, and fiercely ambitious, he's a product of a new generation. one raised on the legends of Scarfo and Bruno, but unburdened by their caution. He dresses sharp, smiles often, and enjoys the spotlight. Where Stanfa hides in shadows, Merlino walks through the front door. He's already made a name for himself. Known for his flashy demeanor and confidence, he attracts a following of young, hungry men who see in him both opportunity and rebellion. They call him Skinny Joey. To them, he's not just a boss in waiting, he's a symbol of defiance against the suffocating rules of the old Mafia. But for the old guard, Merlino is trouble, loud, unpredictable, and dangerous. His presence threatens decades of carefully maintained order. To the traditionalists, he represents the collapse of the code, the omerta that once defined their way of life. Merlino's rise begins quietly. He builds his own crew, expanding influence through South Philadelphia and Atlantic City. Gambling operations, loan sharking, and drug profits fuel his ascent. He uses charm to build alliances and audacity to command respect. Men who once swore loyalty to Stanfa begin to drift toward him. Law enforcement takes notice. To them, Joey Merlino doesn't fit the old mold of a mobster. He's visible, even flamboyant. He frequents clubs, attends charity events, and seems to enjoy the media's attention. He doesn't hide from the spotlight. He embraces it. Reporters follow his movements, tabloids publish his photos, and the public becomes fascinated by the young mobster who seems to treat organized crime like a stage. But behind the charisma lies a growing hunger for power. Merlino's crew is young, impatient, and fearless. They see the Philadelphia family as theirs for the taking. In private meetings, plans begin to form. Whispers of pushing out the old guard, of reshaping the city's criminal structure under new leadership. Stanfa, ever watchful, recognizes the threat. He tightens control over his operations, calls in favors from New York allies, and places trusted men in key positions. But every move he makes seems to provoke further defiance. The more he clamps down, the more Merlino's crew pushes back. One mob associate later described the growing tension. Stanfa tried to run the family like it was still the 70s. Joey and his guys, they weren't about the old rules. They were about the money, the flash, the name. They wanted to be seen, not hidden. By 1991, the lines are clearly drawn. The streets of South Philadelphia begin to divide, not between rival gangs, but between generations of the same family. On one side, Stanfa's soldiers, older, cautious, bound by loyalty to the old ways. On the other, Merlino's young faction, aggressive, impatient, eager for glory. The first sparks of violence appear. Drive-by shootings, bomb threats, and street beatings become common. Men disappear, others turn up dead. What begins as a quiet power struggle slowly turns into open warfare. Stanfa tries to reason with New York's commission, arguing that Merlino's behavior threatens the stability of the entire organization. But the commission has its own problems. The Mafia is under siege nationally. The FBI's Pizza Connection trials and RICO cases have decimated families from coast to coast. Philadelphia's chaos is just one more headache in a crumbling empire. Stanfa receives limited support. New York backs his legitimacy but expects results. They want order restored, fast. But Stanfa knows order cannot come without blood. Meanwhile, Merlino's star continues to rise. The younger generation rallies around him not just for money, but for identity. They see themselves as modern, faster, smarter, freer from the archaic codes that constrained their predecessors. They wear their defiance proudly, even when it invites violence. Merlino's growing influence is undeniable. Law enforcement agents begin to refer to his faction as the Young Turks, a new wave of gangsters who combine media attention with ruthless ambition. And as their confidence grows, so does the danger. Tension peaks in 1992. An attempted hit targets one of Stanfa's men, signaling the beginning of open conflict. The retaliation is swift. Cars rigged with explosives, homes shot up, warnings delivered through violence. Philadelphia becomes a city divided by fear once again. The FBI increases surveillance, planting bugs in restaurants, cars, and club offices. What they capture is chaos. Men plotting revenge, exchanging threats, and discussing strategies for survival. One agent later described it as a war fought in whispers and detonations. Merlino's defiance transforms the Philadelphia mob. Gone is the quiet, calculating diplomacy of the past. In its place stands a generation that courts attention, thrives on chaos, and believes invincibility lies in audacity. By the end of 1992, there's no longer any illusion of unity. The Philadelphia crime family is split in two, with both sides preparing for total war. The city feels it, the fear, the unease, the sense that something larger and bloodier is coming. Stanfa sees it too. He knows that to keep power he must destroy Merlino. But he also knows that every act of violence brings more heat from the FBI. And every failure to act brings him closer to irrelevance. As winter closes in, both factions prepare for the inevitable. Bombs are built, targets are named. Men whisper oaths of loyalty, knowing it may seal their fate. The streets of Philadelphia are about to run red again. In the coming years, the city will witness one of the most violent internal wars in American Mafia history. A war not between rivals, but brothers. A war where the old ways die, and the new generation rises through fire, ambition, and betrayal. The stage is set. The young guns are ready, and in the heart of South Philadelphia, the countdown to the first explosion begins. Chapter 4. Blood in the Streets. The year is 1993. Philadelphia's underworld is a battlefield. The uneasy tension between John Stanfa and Joey Merlino has finally snapped. And now, bullets and bombs speak louder than words. It begins with an ambush. One morning as the city stirs awake, gunfire echoes through South Philadelphia. A car carrying Joey Merlino and his close associate Michael Ciancaglini is riddled with bullets. The attackers are men loyal to Stanfa. Merlino is hit in the buttocks, but he survives. Ciancaglini is killed instantly. The message is clear. The war is on. Within days, the retaliation begins. Shots are fired at Stanfa loyalists. Businesses tied to his regime are torched. The streets, once ruled by fear and silence, now vibrate with chaos. Everyone knows someone on one side or the other, and everyone knows that one mistake, one wrong word, could make them the next target. The FBI begins to monitor the bloodshed closely. Special Agent James Maher later recalls the atmosphere. It was unlike anything we'd seen since the Scarfo years. These weren't quiet, strategic hits anymore. It was open warfare. Stanfa, ever the traditionalist, tries to maintain discipline through violence and structure. He brings his son, Joseph Joey Stanfa, into the fold, grooming him as a trusted enforcer. But in doing so, he drags his own family into the line of fire. One morning, Joey Stanfa's car explodes as he starts the ignition. The younger Stanfa survives, but just barely. The explosion rocks the city, a literal flashpoint in the mob war. Philadelphia hasn't seen this kind of chaos since the early 1980s under Nicodemo "Little Nicky" Scarfo. But this time, it's different. There's no united mob family at war with rivals. This is civil war, brother against brother, mentor against protege. The Merlino faction, often called the Young Guys, operates like a street army. They drive stolen cars, move fast, and communicate through coded messages and payphones. They strike quickly, vanish into the city, and reappear at clubs later that night as if nothing happened. To them, violence is currency, proof of loyalty and power. Joey Merlino, despite his near-death experience, becomes a folk figure. The newspapers call him the Dapper Don of Philly. The public sees him as a reckless but magnetic gangster, part mobster, part celebrity. To law enforcement, he's a nightmare, a man too visible to ignore and too dangerous to underestimate. In contrast, John Stanfa remains hidden, operating out of safe houses and secret offices. His men are older, more cautious, and increasingly paranoid. The FBI bugs his car and office, capturing his deepening frustration as his grip on power slips. On one tape, Stanfa laments, "These kids don't respect nothing. They don't know how to keep quiet." But the truth is, respect has already vanished. The streets are choosing sides, and the tide is turning toward the younger, more charismatic Merlino. The war spirals through 1993 and into 1994. Dozens of shootings, attempted assassinations, and bombings rock South Philly. Businesses close early. Ordinary citizens avoid certain blocks. Even those uninvolved in the mob feel the tension, an invisible noose tightening around the city's neck. Stanfa attempts to strike back hard. He orders hits on suspected Merlino loyalists, often carried out in broad daylight. But every assassination attempt only seems to embolden his enemies. Merlino's crew retaliates with even more audacity. In August 1993, another dramatic hit shakes the streets. Stanfa himself becomes a target. He's driving on Interstate 95 when a van pulls alongside his car. Gunmen open fire with automatic weapons. Bullets tear through the windshield. Somehow, Stanfa survives, shot in the jaw but alive. His driver, Anthony Pungitori, isn't as lucky. For the Philadelphia mob, it's a turning point. The boss himself has been hit. Law enforcement responds with full force. The FBI, working alongside local police, launches an expansive surveillance operation. Agents bug phones, wiretap restaurants, and follow suspected soldiers 24/7. But the mobsters are undeterred. The violence only escalates. At night, the streets of South Philadelphia echo with the sounds of gunfire. Windows shatter, tires screech, and sirens never stop. Each hit fuels the next. Each body dropped deepens the hatred. For the first time, civilians begin openly talking about the Mafia again. Not as ghosts of a bygone era, but as a living, violent force tearing the city apart. The local press dubs it the mob war that won't end. Even inside the mob, fear takes hold. Associates refuse meetings. Soldiers vanish. Informants begin whispering to the FBI, trading secrets for safety. The violence begins to wear on Stanfa's crew. His power base weakens as arrests mount. His men grow restless, paranoid. Some even defect. Merlino, on the other hand, thrives under pressure. He moves constantly, changing cars and locations, surrounded by loyal soldiers who idolize him. To them, he's not just a leader, he's the future. In one intercepted conversation, a young Merlino associate brags, "Stanfa's done. We're taking it all back. This is Joey's town now." But the blood hasn't stopped spilling. The war continues into 1994. Another car bomb goes off, targeting a Stanfa ally. Another retaliatory shooting leaves 2 dead in a restaurant parking lot. Philadelphia becomes a city where everyone looks over their shoulder, even mobsters. The FBI's surveillance rooms buzz constantly with new recordings, new intel, new violence. Special Agent Maher later admits, "At some point, it stopped feeling like law enforcement versus the mob. It was like we were watching them destroy themselves." And they were. By the fall of 1994, the Philadelphia Mafia is fractured beyond repair. The once feared organization built by Angelo Bruno and ruled by Scarfo is now a collection of factions, each clawing for control while the FBI closes in. John Stanfa, the old-school boss, sees his empire collapsing. His trusted lieutenants are dead, jailed, or switching sides. His own son barely survived a bombing. His power, once absolute, now hangs by a thread. And Joey Merlino, the ambitious young rebel, has transformed from a flashy upstart into a ruthless commander. His war is no longer about rebellion. It's about survival and dominance. The streets of Philadelphia are soaked in blood, and neither side can claim victory. But soon, the FBI will step in. And when they do, the final act of this violent drama will begin. Not with gunfire, but with indictments. The young guns have won the streets, but the law is watching, and the walls are closing in. Chapter 5. The Fall of the Boss. The year is 1995. Philadelphia wakes to a different kind of quiet, not peace but exhaustion. After nearly 3 years of bombings, shootings, and assassinations, the city's Mafia war has burned itself down to embers. John Stanfa, the once iron-fisted boss of the Philadelphia crime family, is no longer the untouchable man he once was. The FBI has spent years watching him, recording him, dissecting his every move. And now, the walls have finally closed in. Federal agents move in at dawn. Stanfa is driving through South Philadelphia when his car is surrounded. Flashing lights, shouted commands, the end of an era. Inside the Bureau, it's called Operation Sunshine, a sweeping federal takedown that targets the entire upper hierarchy of the Stanfa organization. Dozens of arrests follow. Agents seize documents, cash, weapons, even coded notebooks filled with payoffs and protection payments. The case is airtight. Wiretaps and surveillance tapes expose a crumbling empire, murder plots, extortion rackets, and deep divisions within the family. The FBI has hours of recordings, Stanfa cursing disloyal soldiers, giving coded orders, and lamenting how his men don't know how to be quiet anymore. In one taped conversation, he's heard complaining, "They talk too much. They bring heat. You can't run a family like this." For federal prosecutors, it's the kind of evidence they've dreamed of since the Scarfo days, direct proof of organized crime operations and hierarchy. As Stanfa sits in custody, the Philadelphia mob he once controlled continues to unravel. His allies scramble to find lawyers. His soldiers scatter or flip. His rivals, Joey Merlino's crew, quietly celebrate. Stanfa refuses to cooperate. He's a man of the old code, the Sicilian tradition, loyalty above all. But that code means little when your family has abandoned you and your enemies are gaining ground. The indictments read like a blueprint of Philadelphia's criminal underworld. Stanfa and his top men are charged with racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, and illegal gambling. The trial will stretch on for years, but the outcome is already written. The evidence is overwhelming. The testimony is damning. Former associates turn informants, detailing the inner workings of the Stanfa regime, how meetings were held in warehouses, how profits were divided, how rivals were marked for death. One witness, Gaetano Tommy Horsehead Scafidi, describes the fear that came with crossing the boss. If Stanfa thought you were against him, you were gone. It was that simple. But even as prosecutors build their case, something new begins stirring in South Philadelphia. Joey Merlino, the man once dismissed as a reckless kid, starts consolidating power. He moves with caution now. His flashy reputation is tempered by experience. The war has hardened him. The younger faction rallies around him, seeing him as the natural successor to the throne. To them, Stanfa's arrest isn't the end of an era. It's an opportunity. In neighborhoods once torn apart by bombings, Merlino's presence grows. He's seen at social clubs, shaking hands, smiling for cameras. The press calls him Skinny Joey, a nickname that sticks. Unlike the reclusive bosses of old, Merlino doesn't hide. He embraces the spotlight. Law enforcement watches closely, recognizing the shift. One FBI agent notes, "Joey was different. He wanted the attention. He wanted to be the celebrity gangster." But for now, the focus remains on Stanfa's downfall. In 1996, after a long and grueling trial, John Stanfa is found guilty on multiple counts of racketeering and murder conspiracy. He's sentenced to life in prison without parole. When the verdict is read, he shows no emotion, no outburst, no visible anger. Just the quiet resignation of a man who knows the life he built is gone forever. To the FBI, it's a victory years in the making, the takedown of one of the last old-school Mafia bosses in America. To the streets of Philadelphia, it's the death of an era. The old guard, men who built their empires in the shadows, who valued secrecy, structure, and the old Sicilian codes, are gone. In their place stands a new generation, one that grew up on the headlines of the Scarfo and Stanfa years, unafraid of the spotlight, unafraid of risk. Joey Merlino represents that shift. As Stanfa begins his life sentence in a federal penitentiary, Merlino steps into the vacuum. The FBI expects chaos, but what follows is something different. Order, at least for a time. Merlino reorganizes the family with a new image. He opens social clubs, hosts charity events, and even takes calls from reporters. The Philadelphia press paints him as the John Gotti of South Philly, a mob boss with charm, style, and a dangerous smile. But beneath that image, the same criminal operations continue. Loan sharking, bookmaking, extortion. The faces have changed, but the business hasn't. Stanfa's downfall marks the end of Philadelphia's old Mafia, the world built by Angelo Bruno and carried on by his successors. With his imprisonment, The last thread connecting the Sicilian past to the American present is severed. Behind bars, Stanfa remains silent. He never flips, never betrays. His silence becomes his final act of loyalty, or defiance. For the FBI, the war is over. But in South Philadelphia, the streets still hum with quiet tension. Everyone knows that in the Mafia, power never truly disappears, it only changes hands. As Joey Merlino rises, Philadelphia enters a new chapter, one shaped by the cameras, the tabloids, and a new kind of gangster who doesn't hide in the shadows. The city may have escaped the car bombs and ambushes of the early 1990s, but the game is far from over. The faces are younger, the rules are looser, and the line between criminal and celebrity has never been thinner. For the first time in decades, the Philadelphia mob feels untouchable again. But history, as always, has a way of catching up. Chapter 6. The Rise of Skinny Joey. The prison gates close behind John Stanfa, and just like that, the Philadelphia Mafia, bloodied, fractured, but not broken, belongs to Joey Merlino. He's 33 years old, charismatic, stylish, and utterly fearless. To the press, he's Skinny Joey, the handsome outlaw who survived a mob war and came out on top. To law enforcement, he's the embodiment of everything the old bosses feared: reckless, unpredictable, and dangerously public. The year is 1996. The FBI calls it the new era of the Philadelphia crime family. Merlino wastes no time asserting control. The remnants of the Stanfa regime either switch sides, disappear, or vanish into the witness protection program. Merlino consolidates his power base with his trusted allies: George Borghese, Stephen Mazzoni, Marty Angelina, and Joe Legambi. Together they form what agents will later call the Merlino faction. Their stronghold is in South Philadelphia, the bars, the clubs, the social halls. But this isn't the Mafia of Bruno's quiet diplomacy or Scarfo's terror. Merlino brings something new: visibility. He's photographed at restaurants, seen courtside at 76ers games, smiling beside celebrities. Reporters follow him everywhere. One journalist writes, "Joey Merlino is either the most reckless mobster in America or the most confident." To the public, he's a paradox: a gangster with the swagger of a rock star and the composure of a politician. He doesn't hide from the cameras, he performs for them. But beneath the charisma lies an operation as ruthless as ever. Bookmaking, extortion, and loan sharking remain the backbone of the family's economy. Shakedowns are enforced with precision. Debts are collected, or settled with violence. The old codes of the Mafia still apply, even if the suits have been replaced by designer clothes and leather jackets. Merlino's headquarters is the Montes Lounge at 9th and Catherine, a hangout for wise guys, gamblers, and neighborhood regulars. Inside, Joey holds court. He jokes with friends, buys drinks for strangers, and listens to grievances from his crew. To the untrained eye, it looks like a social club. To the FBI, it's a command center. Agents bug the phones, monitor his cars, and plant informants nearby. They watch him gamble, drink, laugh, and flirt. But they can't prove he's the boss. One FBI report reads, "Merlino projects himself as a legitimate businessman and neighborhood figure. He's careful with words, never admits to leadership, but everyone defers to him." It's a delicate dance, and for a while, it works. Merlino becomes something of a local folk hero. He throws block parties for kids, hosts Christmas dinners for the homeless, donates to cancer charities in his mother's name. The media eats it up. The Philadelphia Inquirer calls him the people's mob boss. To the public, he's a paradox, part menace, part celebrity. To the FBI, he's a ticking time bomb. By the late 1990s, tensions within the family start to resurface. Some old-school members still loyal to Stanfa resent Merlino's flash and his disregard for tradition. The New York families, particularly the Gambinos and Genoveses, view him as a liability, a man who draws too much attention to a world built on silence. But Joey doesn't care. He's the king of Philadelphia now, and he acts like it. Still, beneath the charm and confidence, paranoia grows. Joey knows what happened to every boss before him. He's seen how quickly the crown can fall: Bruno, Scarfo, Stanfa. each one taken down by betrayal or the law. So he builds loyalty through friendship and fear. His closest men are bound by blood and history. Many of them grew up together, childhood friends turned enforcers. To outsiders, they're a gang. To each other, they're family. But the FBI is relentless. Undercover agents and wiretaps begin to paint a clearer picture of Merlino's operation. They track payoffs, follow money trails, and document coded meetings. Every phone call, every coffee shop conversation, every car ride is potential evidence. By 1998, federal prosecutors believe they finally have enough. They move forward with a massive RICO case, one that aims to dismantle the Philadelphia Mafia once and for all. The indictment lists charges of racketeering, gambling, and conspiracy to commit murder. Joey Merlino, George Borgesi, Stephen Mazzone. The entire leadership structure is named. When the arrests come, they make headlines across the country. FBI nabs Skinny Joey and Philly mob leadership in sweeping crackdown. Reporters swarm the courthouse as Merlino, dressed in an expensive suit and smiling confidently, tells them, "I'm not a mob boss. The only thing I'm guilty of is being Italian." The cameras flash. The city watches. In the courtroom, prosecutors lay out a decade of evidence, wiretaps, surveillance photos, and testimony from informants who once called Joey a friend. One of them, Ralph Natal, a former boss who served as Merlino's mentor, turned state's witness. His testimony electrifies the trial. Natale tells the court, "Joey ran everything. I was just the figurehead. He made the calls. He gave the orders." The betrayal cuts deep. Merlino listens silently as the man who once guided him to power dismantles him in public. But in the end, the government's case isn't as airtight as it hoped. The jury convicts Merlino on lesser racketeering and gambling charges but clears him of the most serious murder counts. The sentence, 14 years in federal prison. For law enforcement, it's still a victory. The removal of a high-profile mob boss. For Joey Merlino, it's just another round in a long game. As he's led away, he smirks at the cameras. "I'll be back," he says. "Don't worry about me." The crowd outside cheers, reporters shout questions, and for a moment it's clear, Joey Merlino isn't just a gangster. He's an icon, a symbol of the modern American mob, bold, media-savvy, and impossible to ignore. Behind bars, his legend only grows. Stories circulate of how he commands respect even inside prison, how his charm wins over guards and inmates alike. His name becomes folklore. The gangster who refused to hide, the man who turned organized crime into public theater. But the world is changing fast. The FBI's technology is evolving, the streets are less loyal, and the era of the celebrity mobster is fading. Joey Merlino may have risen higher than anyone thought possible, but every rise in the mob comes with a fall. And when he finally walks out of prison years later, he'll return to a Philadelphia that's no longer the same. The city has moved on. The streets have new players. And the game he once ruled has changed forever. Still, one truth remains. In the long, bloody history of the Philadelphia mob, no one burned brighter or fell harder than Skinny Joey. Chapter 7. Return of the Dapper Don. The year is 2011. 14 years have passed since Joey Merlino last walked the streets of South Philadelphia as a free man. The neighborhood has changed. The mob has changed. But when he steps out of federal prison in Indiana, reporters are waiting, because Joey Merlino still has that spark. He's older now, leaner, but still sharp. His grin, once boyish, now carries a veteran's confidence. The cameras flash as he walks past them, dressed neatly, smiling, composed. He doesn't say much, but he doesn't have to. The legend of Skinny Joey speaks for itself. After serving more than a decade behind bars, Joey insists he's done with the mob life. He tells reporters, "I just want to live a normal life. I'm out of that life. I'm retired." The claim sounds familiar. It's what every boss says when they get out. But with Joey, the line between truth and theater is always blurred. He leaves Philadelphia for Florida, settling in Boca Raton. The tabloids call it, "The Dapper Don Goes South." Down there, Joey opens a restaurant, Merlino's, an upscale Italian spot that quickly becomes a magnet for attention. The decor is polished, the food praised, and the patrons curious. They come not just for the veal parmesan, but for the man himself, the mobster who beat the odds. He smiles for photos, shakes hands with guests, and tells stories about the old days, always careful to frame them as distant memories. To some, he's a reformed man, a businessman trying to move on. To others, he's still the boss, just relocated. The FBI isn't convinced. Even from Florida, federal agents in Philadelphia keep tabs on him. They know the mob rarely retires. It just relocates. The Bureau begins quietly monitoring his calls, his associates, his finances. Meanwhile, back in Philadelphia, the landscape has shifted. The once feared organization is a shadow of its former self. Many of the old-timers are dead, imprisoned, or turned informant. Joe Ligambi, one of Joey's loyalists, has taken on the caretaker role. Calm, quiet, keeping the peace. But the streets still whisper Merlino's name. Every few months, rumors surface that Joey is still calling the shots, from a restaurant table in Boca Raton, through coded phone calls and loyal intermediaries. The FBI begins to suspect that the retirement is just another act in Merlino's lifelong performance. In 2014, federal prosecutors unveil Operation East Coast. It's a sweeping investigation targeting alleged Mafia figures from New York to Florida. And once again, Joey Merlino's name is at the center. Wiretaps and informants claim he's part of a loose criminal alliance, a network of old-school mobsters quietly rebuilding influence. The indictment reads like a roll call of the underworld: Genovese, Gambino, Lucchese, and Philadelphia. Joey is arrested again. The charges: racketeering, illegal gambling, and health insurance fraud. When the agents knock on his Florida home, Joey greets them calmly. He's almost bemused. He tells reporters, "They've been after me my whole life. I'm not guilty of anything." The trial becomes a media event, just like before. Prosecutors present recordings, witnesses, and phone transcripts. They claim Joey was running bookmaking operations, coordinating with New York mobsters, and laundering money through businesses. But Merlino's defense team paints a different picture. They argue the case is built on weak evidence and unreliable witnesses, including a key informant with a history of lying. The recordings, they say, capture nothing incriminating. In the courtroom, Joey is relaxed, confident, smiling, unflappable. The reporters eat it up. The jury deliberates for days. Finally, they announce they're deadlocked. Mistrial. Joey walks out free. Again. The government eventually offers a plea deal on a minor charge: running an illegal gambling operation. Merlino accepts and serves a short sentence. When he's released, the message is clear: he's still untouchable. To the FBI, it's infuriating. To the public, it's fascinating. To Joey Merlino, it's vindication. He tells a journalist outside court, "They've been trying to put me away for 30 years. I'm still here." Even in his 50s, Merlino remains a figure larger than life. His suits are sharp, his hair perfectly combed. He still smiles for cameras. The old-school mobsters avoided attention like the plague. Joey invites it. In many ways, he's the last of a dying breed, a gangster who turned himself into a brand. In Boca Raton, locals still recognize him at cafes and restaurants. Some call him Mr. Merlino. Others whisper, half-joking, "That's the guy who ran Philly." He laughs it off, posing for photos, occasionally signing autographs. The old ways of the Mafia, omertà, secrecy, blood oaths, are fading fast. But Joey Merlino endures as a paradox. A man who lived by the code, yet survived by breaking its oldest rule: staying in the shadows. Federal agents still track him, waiting for one slip, one mistake. But Joey's learned from the past. He's more careful, more disciplined, and above all, more aware that every move he makes is watched. The Philadelphia mob, once an empire of hundreds, now exists as a small network. Aging soldiers, part-time bookmakers, and street hustlers clinging to the remnants of power. But Joey remains its beating heart. Even without a formal title, even from hundreds of miles away, his influence lingers. Some say he's truly retired, content with his quiet Florida life. Others believe he's still the boss, just one phone call away. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. Joey Merlino outlasted them all. Scarfo, Stanfa, Natale, all gone or forgotten. Merlino survived the wars, the betrayals, the prisons, and somehow came out the other side with his image intact. To some, that makes him lucky. To others, it makes him legendary. Today the world of organized crime is smaller, quieter, more digital. But in Philadelphia, when old-timers talk about the life, one name still carries weight. A name that evokes both fear and fascination. A name that reminds everyone how far charm and audacity can carry a man in the underworld. Joey Merlino, the last public face of the Philadelphia Mafia. The dapper Don, who refused to disappear. Chapter 8. The Last Dawn of Philadelphia. The sun sets over South Philadelphia. The corner bars are quieter now, the old hangouts fewer. The neon glow of Broad Street hums softly, but the shadows that once hid mob soldiers and whispers of the life have faded. It's the 2020s, and the American Mafia is not what it used to be. The days of sit-downs at Italian restaurants and shootouts in alleyways are long gone. But one name, one man, still keeps the legend alive: Joey Merlino. To understand what he represents now, you have to look at what's been lost. Once, the Philadelphia mob was one of the most powerful criminal organizations in America. Under Angelo Bruno, it was disciplined, calculated, and profitable. Under Nicodemo Scarfo, it turned into a slaughterhouse. And under Joey Merlino, it became something else entirely, part crime family, part cult of personality. Joey's leadership was never about quiet power. It was about image, bravado, and a strange kind of charisma. He brought cameras into a world that used to fear the light. He posed for photos, smiled during trials, and waved to reporters like a movie star. To the public, he was almost cinematic, the modern outlaw with style. To law enforcement, he was an obsession. To the remnants of the Philadelphia family, he was a reminder of what being somebody used to mean. But time changes everything. The mob's old rackets, loan sharking, gambling, union shakedowns, don't pay like they once did. Sports betting is legal now. Labor unions are watched closely. And the new generation doesn't speak in whispers or wear fedoras. They trade crypto and move drugs through encrypted apps. By the mid-2010s, federal agents admit it quietly. The Philadelphia family once feared is now a ghost. But ghosts still haunt. Meanwhile, the FBI hasn't stopped watching. They keep eyes on the old crew, the Merlino loyalists who still walk South Philly streets. Names like George Borghese, Stevie Mazzone, and Johnny Chang show up in small indictments, racketeering cases, and gambling busts. But the days of 100-count RICO trials are over. Now the feds call it micro-mafia, small cells, aging men, shrinking profits. Joey's legacy divides the underworld. Some call him reckless, a showman who brought too much heat to the life. Others call him smart, a survivor who adapted, evolved, and outlasted everyone who tried to kill him or cage him. Even his enemies can't deny it. Joey Merlino is the last man standing from the chaos of the 1990s. John Stanfa's gone. Ralph Natale flipped. The young Turks of that bloody era are dead or old. But Joey, he's still sharp, still tan, still smiling. Down in Boca Raton, he plays golf, eats well, and keeps a small circle. He's no longer feared. He's admired. His restaurant, his interviews, his quiet life all tell the same story. The legend has replaced the man. In 2022, an aging federal agent reflected on him in an interview. He said, "Merlino wasn't the biggest earner or the most violent, but he understood attention. He made the Mafia famous again, for better or worse. That's what makes Joey different. Where most mobsters faded into the background or vanished into witness protection, he stepped into the spotlight and stayed there. He turned a secret society into a headline. He made the Mafia relatable, even charming, a dangerous thing for law enforcement but irresistible for the public. And maybe that's why his story still matters. Because the Philadelphia mob was never just about crime. It was about control, pride, and identity. South Philly wasn't just a battleground. It was a home. Men like Joey Merlino grew up seeing gangsters as neighborhood kings, protectors, providers, symbols of defiance. When the rest of the world moved on, he kept that spirit alive, even as everything else changed. Today, when true crime fans talk about the Mafia, they speak of New York's 5 families, of Chicago's outfit. But ask anyone in Philadelphia and they'll tell you Joey Merlino is still the guy. Not because he's the richest, not because he's the toughest, but because he's the last one who made the mob feel alive. He was the bridge between eras, from the bloody chaos of Scarfo to the spectacle of modern fame. A man who outwitted killers, survived wars, and turned his name into a brand. And when he's gone, there may never be another like him. The Mafia today exists mostly in memory. Old names, faded photos, and wiretap transcripts gathering dust in FBI archives. But Joey Merlino's story endures. It's the story of the last mob war, the last true boss, and the last time the world believed the Mafia still had kings. In the end, the Philadelphia crime family didn't end with a shootout. It ended with a smile. The same smile that walked out of every courtroom, every headline, every storm. A survivor's smile, a legend's smile. And behind it, the quiet truth that maybe Joey Merlino was never just a gangster. He was the final performance of an American myth.